Hello everyone, welcome to Drishti IAS. You're watching the NCERT Foundation series wherein we study the subject of polity or political science with the help of MCQs and PYQs wherever relevant. So without further ado, let's plunge right in. As per the norm, I have brought for you a quick glance at what we'll be covering today. So we are doing chapter 4 of class 10 NCERT, which is titled Political Parties, and we are going to be doing these 4 major subtopics. We're going to be covering these with the help of questions, and these topics are: first, what is the need for political parties? How many parties should we have ideally? National and state parties and the criteria and differences between them. And finally, the challenges that political parties face. And this about sums up your 4th chapter of NCERT. All right, let's begin with the previous day question. So in front of you are 2 lists, one with the concept, the other with the meaning, and you have to match both the lists. Let's begin. 1. Patriarchy. So patriarchy is one of the most commonly used words, and we know that it is about the domination of the male gender over the female gender, all right? So, rule by men and power over women. The next term is secularism. We spent quite some time in the preceding lecture studying about secularism. It is indeed equal treatment of all religions by the state. It is also about principled distance or principled non-intervention by state in religious affairs. So this is already matched. Feminism, belief in equal rights for men and women. Yes, and this movement emerged as a response to a social setup that had become deeply patriarchal. This again is correctly matched. 4th, theocracy. Theocracy has to do with the rule of priests or rule by clergy or clerics, and they frame laws on the basis of religious texts. So the laws are religious in nature. You may take the example of a country like Iran, where the key decisions are taken by the clerics, and they usually do so on the basis of Islamic law. So this is a very good example of a theocracy. The option A is your correct answer. Let's discuss the first question for today's session, which is based on political parties. Which of the following best defines a political party? Now, in simple terms, if we try and understand what political parties are, they are basically a group of people who come together to form a government, to contest elections and then run a government, all right? So, let's try and understand what political parties are. So, political parties are a group of people that come together to contest elections and then form the government. Now, these political parties also have certain programs or policies in mind. They have certain programs or policies in mind that they feel are overall desirable for the collective good. So, of course, they want to benefit the societies at large, the society overall, and they feel that the policies and programs that they propose are desirable for the collective good. How do they do that? They try to win popular support. So, of course, they win popular support, they contest elections, and they try to win the elections as well. How do they try to win popular support? By persuading people that their programs and policies are better than their competitors or their other political rival political parties. So, they try to win popular support by persuading people that their programs and policies are superior as compared to the alternates. Now, What comprises of these political parties? There are three elements in political parties, or that can be said to form a political party. One, the leaders. Leaders are the ones who take the decisions. The most key decisions are taken by the leaders. Then there are active members who would usually implement these decisions or run around, fulfilling the commands of the leaders. Finally, there are followers who follow the ideology and the mandates of the political party. Now, based on what we have understood, let's try and solve the question. What best defines political party? Option A says an NGO that advocates social causes. We can rule that out immediately. B says a group that contests elections and seeks to hold government power. This is exactly what we studied. C says a pressure group that influences legislation from outside. See, technically speaking, in various places, pressure groups are actually extensions of political parties. They can be considered extensions of political parties, but they do not qualify as political parties and cannot be considered as political parties. Finally, a constitutional body, absolutely not, that supervises elections. We have been studying in the preceding few lectures about which constitutional bodies supervise our elections. So it is the ECI, or the Election Commission of India, for elections to the Lok Sabha, the state legislatures, as well as the president and the vice president, and the state election commissions that supervise elections to the panchayats and the local bodies. So this we can conveniently and safely rule out and arrive at our correct answer, which happens to be option B. Question 2 says, consider the following functions of political parties. Now here we are talking about functions of political parties. Let's consider them one by one. So earlier we discussed what political parties are, and we said that they try to win power by contesting elections. So they contest elections and win power. Now let's try to derive its functions from this very definition that we have. First of all, political parties, I told you, have certain programs and policies in mind with the help of which they contest elections and they try to win popular confidence. So that is the first function, which is framing certain programs and policies for the society's collective welfare. That is their first function. What do they do next? They contest elections. So contesting elections is the next function of political parties. Contesting elections is the next function of the political parties. Now, what do they do after they contest elections? They would normally form and run the government. So this becomes your third function. If they win elections, they would form the government and run it. What happens if they don't win the elections? Or if they win the elections but do not form the government, they turn into opposition parties. So these are those parties that win a seat into the legislature but are unable to form the government. All right? Now, as a part of the government and as part of the legislature, what do they do? They also make laws and policies. And these laws and policies, although framed by the legislature, are usually determined by the direction of the ruling party. So the party that forms the government, which is called the ruling party, is the determining factor of the laws and policies that are discussed, debated and framed in the parliament. What they also do, whether as opposition parties or otherwise, they also help mobilize and shape public opinion. All right. And finally, and I would consider this as one of the most important functions, they provide access to government machinery to the common people. Now, if you imagine, let's say, a rural or a town setup, and you imagine someone having a problem, it is going to be very difficult for them to approach a government officer, but relatively rather easier to approach a local leader or a local political party. Hence, they are the gateways for a common man to the government machinery. Now, based on this discussion, these are the major functions. Based on this discussion, let's try and solve the question in front of us. 1. Contesting elections. We agreed upon it. 2. Making laws via party positions in the legislature. We discussed that once they form the government, they also frame the laws along the direction of the ruling party. 3rd, adjudicating constitutional disputes. Now, this is not a function that we studied, and even if we were to use a little bit of a common sense, we'll realize that adjudicating is actually a function of the judiciary, not of the legislature, not of the executive. So we can rule this out. 4th is shaping public opinion, and we just studied about that. So if we eliminate option 3, we are left with 2 options to choose from. Either A, 1, 2 and 4 only, or D, 1 and 4 only. We have discussed that 3 options are correct, which is 1, 2 and 4 only. We have 3 correct statements. Hence, the correct answer is option A. With reference to multi-party systems, consider the following statements. Now, what is multi-party system? Multi-party system is a system where there are 2 or more parties. There are 2 or more parties that contest elections and have a reasonable chance of winning the elections. Let's try to understand how the system works. So there can be in a democracy, there can be a one-party system. There can also be a two-party system. And finally, there can be a multi-party system. Let's discuss the one-party system. In our very first lecture, when we discussed democracy, we talked about the example of the Communist Party of China or the CCP. China has a one-party system. And we talked about the fact that only those contestants who were either affiliated to the CCP directly or to its allied parties were allowed to field and were allowed to contest for elections. And hence, it totally diminished the true meaning of democracy by eliminating free and fair choice. So, any free and fair choice for the citizens was eliminated by this one-party system. So, this is not really desirable. Again, two-party system. Here what happens is that there are two major parties. There are two major parties in a government, in a country, and the power keeps alternating between these two parties. So, power keeps alternating between these two parties. It does not mean that there are no other parties. Of course, there are other parties as well, and they may also win a few seats in the national legislature. But the main parties that are likely to rule and form governments are only two. Take the case of UK. there are two main parties, the Labour Party and the Conservative Party. Or you can take the example of USA. We have the Democrats and we have the Republicans. So there are other parties, but power alternates between these two main parties, all right? Now let's consider the multi-party system. Here, as we just discussed a couple of minutes ago, there may be two or more parties with a reasonable chance of winning the elections. Sometimes a few parties may even join hands to contest elections, to win it and to form the government. And our country, India, is a case of multi-party system. Now, even though it gives a lot of weightage to aspirations of different people, because different political parties represent the aspirations of different people. But there are two caveats, there are 2 points that may be considered. One, that it kind of promotes, and this happens even in a two-party system, that there is a sense of partisanship. Partisanship, wherever political parties, more than one political parties are involved, there will be a sense of partisanship, which means that people, general people, the voters as well as the members are going to be committed to one view and will not be able to take a balanced view on any subject matters. So they'll be very rigid about the rightness of their own views or their own political party's views, and they will not be able to take a neutral view or a balanced view about matters in hand. That is one catch with a multi-party system or a two-party system, but primarily a multi-party system. Another problem, especially in a multi-party system, is that it promotes or it leads to some sort of a political instability. Why? Because there is an option of forming coalition governments, and governments do topple if at all one party withdraws from the alliance. So based on this, let's try to solve the question that we have. First, they allow diverse interests and opinions to be represented. Yes, this is what we discussed as one of the strengths of multi-party system. Two, they often lead to coalition governments. Absolutely, they do, as we just discussed. And three, they guarantee long-term political stability. On the contrary, they do not guarantee stability, right? They sort of lead to instability. So we can eliminate the third statement. Let's check our options. Let's eliminate all those options which has the third statement and arrive at the correct answer, which is 1 and 2 only, option B. I hope all of this is making sense to you. Question 4. Recognition as a state party requires, among other things. Now, in any federal system of democratic government, we are talking about federal system in a democratic government. Parties could be either focused in one federal unit, okay? The parties are either focused in one federal unit or more than one federal unit. The center as well as other subunits. Now in India, similarly, we have national parties which are basically focused all over the country, throughout the country, and are likely to form national government, as well as certain regional parties which are also called state parties. So, we have national parties and we have state or regional parties. Now, the Election Commission of India has laid down certain criteria with the help of which a party qualifies either as a national party or as a state party. In case of a national party, the said party. For example, let's say we have a party, Green India Party. To qualify as a national party, this party will have to win 6% or more, which is at least 6% or greater than equal to 6% of total valid votes cast in the elections for Lok Sabha in at least 4 states, along with plus and along with 4 seats in Lok Sabha. Alright? So, for example, GIP wins 8% of the total votes cast, and it does so in West Bengal, let's say Punjab, Kerala, and Maharashtra, and another state. Let's also add UP. So it has won 6% of the total valid votes that were cast in the elections, General Assembly elections in all these states, 5 states. Right? So it has satisfied the first criteria. The second, in 4 states, the first criteria has been satisfied because it has won 8% of the total valid votes. Finally, if it wins 4 seats in the Lok Sabha, which it already has won by winning in 5 states, it has won 5 seats. So this party is going to qualify as a national party. Let's talk about state party. In order to qualify as a state party, the said political party should be able to win again at least 6% of total valid votes that are cast in that state assembly election, along with 2 seats in the state assembly. So, for example, let's say we are talking about a party in Odisha. This is the Odisha Green Party. That was the Green India Party. This is the Green Odisha Party. So, suppose we are talking about this party. In order to qualify as a state party, this party will have to win 6% or more votes in the assembly elections, as well as 2 seats in the Legislative Assembly of Odisha. If it successfully fulfills these 2 criteria, then Green Odisha Party becomes a state party in Odisha, just like Green India Party became a national party. Let's look at the 4 options. 10% votes in a state assembly election and 5 seats, no. 6% votes, I beg your pardon, in a state assembly election and at least 2 seats. Yes, this is precisely what we studied. Of course, there are other criterion as well. This is a very elaborate and nuanced topic. But at this level, at this stage, we are going to fix ourselves or confine ourselves to the very basics. Question 5. Which of the following criteria help a political party qualify as a national party in India? Remember, we just did the example of our imaginary Green India Party. And what did we discuss? That it should win greater than equal to 6% of valid votes, 6% of valid votes in 4 states, plus 4 seats in Lok Sabha. This in front of you is the simplest criterion. And this is what has been given in your 10th class NCERT as well. And we are taking this as our basis. Of course, we'll get to further nuances as we move ahead and as the series progresses. So the first is securing at least 6% of valid votes in Lok Sabha or assembly elections in 4 states. Absolutely correct. 2, winning at least 4 seats in the Lok Sabha which is also true, securing at least 10% of the nationwide vote share irrespective of seats. This is something that we haven't studied. All right. So we'll eliminate this and arrive at the correct answer, which is option A. Let's move on to our next question. Question 6, which of the following are functions of opposition parties in a democracy? We talked about opposition parties while discussing perhaps a second or third question, wherein we said that opposition parties are those parties that do win seats in legislature but are unable to form the government. So what are their functions? Criticizing government policies. Yes, that is their core function. And that is a very desirable function. That is the entire basis for the desirability of opposition parties. Why? Because if there's nobody to criticize and provide alternate to the government and its policies, the government will likely turn tyrannical. And we've already studied it in our preceding sessions, especially while we were talking about democracy and democratic elections, that if the government is as powerful so as to win the confidence of the people, it's very likely that it might turn authoritarian or tyrannical. Second statement says mobilizing public opinion against the ruling party. Yes, very much the function of the opposition parties, because they also want to present themselves as an alternate to what the ruling government has to offer. 3, conducting elections for local bodies. No, we just discussed a while ago that the elections for the local bodies are conducted by the state election commissions for their respective states. So let's try and select the correct answer. We are eliminating the third statement here. So C and D get eliminated and we see that 1 and 2 are correct. So we have our correct answer, which is option B. The term partisanship refers to, while we were discussing about political parties, we said that political parties mainly reflect the fundamental political divisions in the country, which means they also involve some level of partisanship. When we talked about partisanship, we said that it referred to inability to take a balanced view. The inability to take a balanced view is what is meant by partisanship. So, based on this, let's see. Commitment to balanced and neutral viewpoints. It is exactly the opposite of what partisanship is. B, commitment to a party group with inability to take a balanced view. We have our correct answer. C says neutrality in all political matters. Like I said, again, partisanship is actually the opposite of neutrality. D, constitutional loyalty to the election commission. No, this is irrelevant to our question. So, option B happens to be our correct answer even for this question. Question 8. Consider the following challenges faced by political parties. Now, what are the challenges? Let's see. Lack of internal democracy. Yes, that is in fact correct, and I'll tell you why. See, in any political parties, I told you that there are 3 elements: the leaders, the members, and the followers. Now, in most cases, and this happens worldwide, we are not simply referring to India, although India happens to be our primary case study, but this happens worldwide, that most of the power is concentrated with the top leadership. So there is a concentration of power, which belongs to the top leadership, and the other members do not have either the influence or the connections to reach to the top level. All right? They do not have either the connections to reach at the top, nor do they have the influence to reach at the top. So what happens that the power year after year, session after session keeps getting concentrated with the leaders, with the top leadership. Hence, of course, there is a lack of internal democracy. There is no democracy within a party. 2, dynastic succession. Now here again, if the top leadership is very powerful, it is going to favor its own kin, its own relatives, its own family. As we can see, in the case of India, and again, you may take examples from all over the world. This is not unique to India, but we are familiar throughout the country. In a lot of parties, this thing happens. 3, increasing influence of money and muscle power. Again, this is a very big challenge to our democratic politics, especially even within intra-party politics. Why is this challenge difficult, or why is this a challenge in itself? This is because parties' main aim is to win elections. They want to win elections. How will they win elections? Usually with a lot of money. So they field contestants from their party only who have a lot of money, or they have a lot of muscle power, a lot of men, so they can bully people. All right. So they field those contestants who have either a lot of money to buy voters, to spend in a lot of campaigning, or who have a lot of muscle power so they can intimidate wherever is required. All right. So this is again very, very important and absolutely correct. 4th, absence of any ideological similarities among parties. Now, this might appear a bit vague, but this is again a very big challenge to political parties. Why? Because earlier it so happened that political parties were separated by strict ideologies and very different ideologies. So, the left and the right, for example, they were absolutely different. But now, if you notice, there is no real choice for the citizens because the political parties are not really very different from each other in terms of what they have to offer, in terms of their ideology. And there is so much of defection, there is so much of party changing that sometimes people cannot even choose different parties. Why? Because a person, for example, I contested elections from one party one day, and then after a while, I moved on to another party for cash or for influence, all right? So this is also a huge problem, even though it doesn't appear that big as of now. So all of the above are major challenges. Here we arrive at a correct answer, which happens to be option D. With reference to the anti-defection law, consider the following. Now, what exactly is anti-defection law? I was just talking about how there is lack of real choice. There is no real choice, partly because the ideologies between two parties are not the same, or they're not very different. They're pretty much similar with mild differences in terms of implementation and framing of policies. But also because few parties have to offer little choice in terms of even candidates, because I may fight for elections with one party and then move on to another. Now, to curb this political horse trading, in order to curb people or candidates winning elections from one party and then switching to another, a law was passed in our country, which is known as the anti-defection law. This belongs to the 10th schedule of our constitution. It was passed in 1985 with the or by the 52nd Constitutional Amendment Act. What was the purpose? It was to curb movement or defection or switching of leaders or of candidates from one party to another. Politicians, or let's say MLAs, basically MLAs, members of the legislative assemblies, from one party to another, either for cash or whatever be their reason. Cash or a better position, ministership, for example. Now, how does this law work? So, if a person voluntarily resigns from the party, suppose there is an MLA who has been elected to the, or MP who has been elected to the legislative assembly, okay, and that person voluntarily resigns. How can a person resign? Either by saying that I'm resigning from the party, or by openly defying the command of the party. So if the party has asked me to vote on a matter, and if I choose to not vote openly, or if the party has given a certain law and I choose to not follow the law or do not agree with the decision of the party, not the law, the decision, all right? Pardon me. So here I am voluntarily resigning. Second, if, again, similar to the first, if I disobey the command of the whip of the party. So, if my direction was to vote in a particular matter and I choose not to vote, I abstain from voting, then I'm defying the command, and vice versa. If I were asked not to vote and I still went ahead and voted in a particular matter, then also I have defied. Further, if an independent member, a person who contested as an independent candidate, means not belonging to any political party, joins a political party after election, then this candidate also faces disqualification, which means he or she faces losing their seat in the parliament or in the legislative assembly. And finally, if a nominated member joins a political party after 6 months of elections. So, suppose a person has been elected but chooses to join another political party. Sorry, if a person has been nominated but chooses to join a political party after 6 months of elections, then of his election, then this also disqualifies him from the seat. So, in order to MLAs or MPs from switching one party to another, an anti-defection law was brought out in 1985 by the Constitutional Amendment 52nd Constitutional Amendment Act. And this is mentioned in the 10th schedule of our Constitution. Now, the aim, as we've discussed, is to stop political horse trading, which means the MLAs cannot switch political parties just for the sake of power or money or whatever is their motivation. All right. This promotes stability in the government. Now, let's consider the case where this law applies. Case number 1. If an MLA or an MP voluntarily resigns. How does this happen? Either, of course, they sign their resignation or they openly defy their party's command. That would also amount to a voluntary resignation. So, if the party has said one thing and I choose to openly defy that, disagree with them in public, this amounts to voluntary resignation. The other thing is, again, voting or abstaining from voting when the party command has asked you to do something, you're doing the other. If you've been asked to vote, you abstain from voting. If you've been asked to abstain, you decided to vote. This also amounts to disqualification under the 10th schedule. If a person was elected as an independent candidate, meaning if the elected MLA or MP did not belong to any political party but chooses to join a political party after elections, then that person also faces disqualification under the anti-defection law. This would be considered defection. Finally, if a nominated candidate or a nominated member of the Legislative Assembly chooses to join a political party after 6 months of his or her elections, after 6 months of his or her election, then this would also be considered as defection. These are 4 criteria where this anti-defection law would apply. However, there is an exception, a couple of exceptions exactly. See, first is the case of merger. Now, if 2/3 members of one political party decide to join another political party, that would not be considered a defection but rather a merger. So, if suppose a political party has 60 members and if only 20 defect and join another political party, say this is party A, this is party B, 20 join party B, this would be considered a defection under the law. However, if 40 members, which is 2/3, if 40 members or 41 members or 45 members decided to join party 2, this would be considered a merger and not a defection. This is also a loophole in the law. It is also considered a criticism for the law, but this is what it is. And also, if a member of the political party was to resign from the party because they became the chairman or the speaker of either the Lok Sabha or the Rajya Sabha or the State Legislative Assembly or the State Legislative Council, then this would not be considered a defection. So, based on this information, let's try to attempt the question that is given. 1. An MLA or MP who defects loses membership of the legislature. This is absolutely correct. The whole idea behind bringing in the law, bringing in a constitutional amendment is to make sure that nobody defects or to minimize defection and that the polity remains stable. That is the whole idea. Otherwise, the penalty is losing your seat in the legislature. Second, the law has reduced instances of defection. This is absolutely correct, backed by data. Because the law has reduced instances of defection because people are always scared of being penalized in the way of or in the form of losing their membership in the legislature. Third, it has increased the scope for dissent within parties. Now, let's think about it. Every time I choose to or I wish to defy an order or vote or abstain from voting when I've been asked to do otherwise, I risk losing my seat in the legislature. I risk losing my qualification to the legislature. Does this mean the scope of dissent has increased? No, it means the scope of dissent has actually reduced because I have to agree with the party top leadership or I stand no chance of having a seat in the legislature. All right. So this can be ruled out. Option C and D can be ruled out likewise. And as we have seen, 1 and 2 are our correct options, statements. The last question, which of the following election commission measures aim to improve internal functioning of parties? Let's see which of these do. Compulsory organizational elections. Yes. So this is basically what you can also understand as internal party elections. So, the Election Commission mandates that the parties should also conduct elections for various posts like presidents or any other office bearers. And one person cannot become the president for a lifetime without being a part of any elections, right? This is to promote internal party democracy. Second, mandatory filing of income tax returns. Of course, your audited accounts and again, income tax returns should be filed. Why? Again, to promote financial transparency so that there are less chances of frauds and black money. You have to provide an account of the money that has been given to the party, has been invested in the party, and so on and so forth. Third, reservation of seats for women in candidates list. Now, this seems to be like a very tempting thing to do. And of course, this has been debated as well. But while this option is available in the Panchayat elections, and now the Nari Shakti Vandan Adhiniyam has also been brought in, although pending delimitation and census exercises. This is not an ECI mandate. ECI has not mandated an internal party reservations for women. So we can safely eliminate this option. And with this, we can also eliminate options B, C and D and arrive at our correct answer, which is option A. I hope so far things have been clear to you. Now, before we move forward, let's take a look at the NCERT online course for your UPSC foundation. The course provides you 150 plus classes and 2 years of validity. And the good part is that if you purchase this course and visit any of our offline physical centers to get yourselves enrolled in the IAS GS Foundation Classroom course, then you'll receive 100% fee waiver equaling the amount that you've paid for the online course, the NCERT online course. If you want more details, kindly click the link in the description box and or call 87501-87501. Now in front of you is the practice question for today. Please take a look or take a screenshot however you want it and we can discuss it in the next session. Kindly send me your answers in the comments section. If you enjoyed today's session, please like, share and subscribe. Thanks for watching.
For more informative content, like, share and subscribe, and do not forget to press the bell icon to get the notifications.